Today we're going to discuss square roots. A square root is defined as something that you multiply by itself to get the square root. For example, the square root of 16 is 4 because 4 times 4 equals 16. All right, now there's something called perfect squares. And these perfect squares are when you do exactly that. They are like 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. They come out to be an even number. So for example, so they are actually this entire diagonal right down the middle of this chart. So whenever you see 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, or 100, those are considered perfect squares. Because if you have the square root of 100, it's going to equal 10 because 10 times 10 equals 100. So they are all of these. All right. And just so you have a little cheat sheet right here, they're all right here. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. So the square root of, let's say, 36 is 6. All right. So, for example, we have the square root of 81 is 9. Okay. The square root of 121. What times what equals 121? That would be 11. The square root of 36. What times what? That's the same, equals 36. That would be 6. And the square root of 400. Now you can figure out what the square root of 400 is by just figuring out what the square root of 4 is, and then tacking a 0 on. So in this case, it would be 20. All right, now, what if we do not have a perfect square? What if our problem doesn't have a perfect square? For example, what is the square root of 20? What is the square root of 20? And you'll always see it, the square root, written as like this. All right. So what is the square root of 20? Well, we know after looking at all our perfect squares that there is no perfect square for 20. So in this case, we have to think, what two perfect squares is 20 between? In this case, it's the square root of 16 and the square root of 25. So it's between 4 and 5. All right, now you can stop right there and you can actually say, well, my answer is between 4 and 5. All right, if it asks you what they're between. If it asks you to estimate, you have to think a little bit further than that. You actually have to think, what is the square root of 20 closer to, 16 or 25? Well, it's closer to 16, so we could estimate it to be more than 4, but a lot less than 5. So in this case, they came to the conclusion it would be 4.2, about. Okay, that's a rough estimation. All right, if it's exactly between those two numbers, then you could probably estimate it to be 4.5, but in this case, because it's closer to 16, that's where they get it from. All right, so just make sure you come prepared tomorrow with any questions or comments you have about square roots or finding non-perfect square roots.